Hi, I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about theory and the use of theory in our research. In our daily lives, we come across different theories, but we probably don't think about it in that way. There are theories about how children acquire language. There are theories about different leadership styles. Many of us are familiar with behaviorism. And so when we think of Skinner, we think of consequences and rewards for behavior. And many of us have pets, and we teach our pets that there are consequences and there are rewards for behavior. And so we're using behaviorism in our daily lives. When we think about behaviorism, I'm aware of that theory that we can use operant conditioning, and we can have consistent application of a reward or consequences to help shape behavior. And so as a parent, I was very consistent that if my child did this or had such and such an attitude, there was a consequence for that. And we know that we have to be consistent in applying those consequences, and we're trying to shape their behavior. We're trying to mold them. And so there are a lot of theories that we're using in everyday life, but we don't walk around talking about a theoretical framework for raising our children. So theories are out there, and you're familiar with some. There is a list that is by no means inclusive of all the theories, but just to kind of get you thinking about some theories, different faculty members just kind of added some theories to a Google list. And I want you to think about what you're doing in life, in the classroom, in your ministry, in your business, and research that is actually guided by a theory that you studied. So let's talk a little bit about theories. There is a consumer satisfaction theory by Tomlinson, and it says that people are consciously or unconsciously comparing their experience to their expectations. So if a customer is using your travel agency business, and they've heard all of these things, and then they used your travel agency and this was their experience, if it lines up with what they expected or it supersedes what they expected, they have high customer satisfaction. We have a grocery store chain in the southeastern United States known as Publix. And Publix at some point, and this could have been years ago, but Publix advertised about having someone there to help you. And if you didn't know where something was, please ask one of our associates. And so when I can't find something in Publix, sure enough, there's somebody there, or I can find somebody and I can ask them and they can, oh, that's on aisle 8. If you just go down a little way, it's on the right-hand side. I will actually walk you to that item. And I'm always like, no, that's okay. Aisle 8's good on the right-hand side. I'll find it, but that is my expectation when I'm at Publix, because that was told to me somehow in an advertisement years ago, and I just remember it. And so I can always find an associate to ask. So businesses can use that Tomlinson customer satisfaction theory to focus on managing customer expectations. What do you want your business to be known for? What do you want your school or your classroom or your church to be known for? And then delivering experiences that align with those expectations to result in high customer satisfaction rates. So that's an example of a theory, in this case, a theory about customer satisfaction that we can apply in the real world. We use theories to explain, predict, and understand phenomenon. And in many cases, we can use a theory to challenge our current knowledge or to extend our current knowledge. And we want to have a theory or a theoretical framework to support our study. We don't want you to just go out and create some research project and carry it out. We want it to be based on what is already known about that problem. And so we say our research is guided by such and such a theory. And this might be a new concept for some of you, or an area that you really haven't delved into that much before. So picking a theory should depend on its appropriateness for the problem that you're studying, the ease of application for that theory, and also that theory's power in explaining your data, or the interpretation of your data, or the application of something. So we want to narrow it down to theories. And sometimes a student will come and say, man, I've got these 5 theories. Okay, well, let's look at these 5 theories that you found on how children acquire language, or how students are conceptualizing mathematical information. Let's look at those 5 theories and let's narrow it down. What could be done to help the student that is studying fractions? I notice that the student is really struggling with fractions. And so I'm thinking about, what can I do as a teacher? So I have this problem that I want to study, and I want to transition from describing the phenomenon of Tommy having problems with fractions to generalizing maybe little aspects, different things that I've noticed about that. Think about the variables that are influencing his ability to work with fractions. And so I've offered manipulatives, as great math teachers do, but I noticed that Tommy is even struggling to build that fraction. If I say 2/3, he's struggling to even use the manipulatives to do that. Well, in all of our education courses, we talk about Vygotsky. And Vygotsky's theory of social constructivism says that when we learn, we can do that as part of a social interaction. We can learn. And when we're learning with somebody who has a little bit more knowledge than we do, we can learn from them. And that helps us build or construct our knowledge. So knowing that about Vygotsky, teachers often use collaborative learning in their classroom. And they say, Ted, would you be willing to come over with Tommy and help build the fractions, work together to build the fractions? And hopefully Ted and Tommy are going to talk about fractions. And that social interaction is going to help construct knowledge for Tommy about fractions. And Ted would say, oh, you've got 3 pieces of the circle here. When Mrs. Yates said 2/3, we should pull out 2 of those 3 pieces. We're looking at 2/3 of the candy bar. And so Vygotsky's theory of social constructivism is saying, when we're hanging out with somebody else, or we're having an discussion, discourse with somebody, that we can learn from them and we can build knowledge. So when we have a theory, we can use it to explain what is happening in the classroom. We can use it to understand more effective ways of teaching. So looking at all of the different theories that are out there, what strategy can you have for building a theoretical framework? Let's do an example that maybe applies to education, but let's do one more from the ministry background. So someone is a minister and they realize that the problem that they want to study and the problem that they want to find a solution to is that students in their Sunday school class, or maybe their congregation, somebody just mentioned that they don't really understand the Psalms. And I was that way until I came to Southeastern as an undergrad many, many decades ago. I was like, oh, it's the longest book of the Bible, 150 chapters. Like, to me, that just seemed like a lot to check off my list in my Bible reading guide. And so I didn't really enjoy Psalms until I studied them with Professor Barnes and understood the meaning of the Psalms. And so maybe this Sunday school teacher or pastor is looking at the problem of students in the Sunday school class or people in the congregation not understanding the Psalms. And so one theory that might work is the schema theory. The schema theory says that when we have background knowledge, it helps us with our comprehension, or it helps us build understanding. I can get a better grasp of new concepts depending on what background knowledge I'm bringing with me. And we know that to be true in life. So we can look at this theory about schema, a schema theory, and we can look at this problem. Brother Jones is really having difficulty understanding the Psalms. And then we realize, wow, he doesn't have the background knowledge. So if we provide some background knowledge, Psalm 51 was written after David had committed adultery with Bathsheba, and he is so sorry for his sin. And this is how Psalm 51 was written. That's the context. Let me give you the background knowledge. When I read it, it makes much more sense. I look at Psalm 142, and we know that David was hiding in a cave when he wrote that psalm, and he was scared for his life because King Saul was coming after him. But let's say we don't have the background knowledge. We don't have the schema. Someone might read, listen to my cry, for I'm in desperate need. Rescue me from those who pursue me, for they're too strong for me. Set me free from my prison. Prison? He's in prison? Well, no. The background knowledge of knowing that David was writing this when he was hiding in a cave, and understanding that King Saul was pursuing David out of jealous anger, and that David doesn't want to harm the king because he's God's anointed one. So he's trying to hide. He's running. And it's not that he's lacks courage. I mean, David had fought off wild animals to protect his sheep. He had killed his tens of thousands, as the people say. But he's taking refuge in the Lord. He says, you are my refuge, my portion in the land of living. Listen to my cry. And so when we understand the background of Psalm 142, we have more chance of comprehending. We can understand it better because we have schema, we have background knowledge. So that's an example of how we take a theory and we apply it to a problem. We're using theories and theoretical frameworks in our everyday life. So we need to talk about developing a theoretical framework now for your future study, or for a problem that you're facing that you want to solve. Leaders solve problems, and you're all leaders in your field. So think about this problem that you have to solve. And because we're talking about research in the doctoral program, we think of a research problem. So we have a research problem, and we're going to brainstorm all of the factors, all of the variables in this problem. And so we just start making a list. What presumed factors are there? What could be contributing to the problem? What might help the problem? And we start making our list. And that's why we review the related literature. We read. When we want to know something, we read and we see what else has been found on this topic. What have others done? What have they tried? And we're going to list all of the constructs, all of the variables that might be relevant to our problem or to our study. And then we're going to review key social science theories. There are so many theories out there, and I don't even know all the theories. Often I'm working with a dissertation student, and they come up with some theory that I had not heard of before. And I'm like, oh, this is so interesting. I didn't know this. And so I tell students to find the theory that best explains your study, your problem, your research that you want to conduct. Sometimes you need to Google. I've got books, I've got psychology books, I have lists of theories, I've got research books, but sometimes I just need to find a theory that I didn't even know was out there. And then I need to read about it. I need to see, has it really been tried and trued? Is it tried and true? Has it been tested before? Is it generally accepted? So I want to find that theory that I think might explain the variables relationship to the problem. So I do that by reading and studying. And I look at these variables and I kind of use that theoretical framework to point out the relevance of these factors that I want to study, or these variables, to the problem. So theoretical framework is something that's going to guide my research. It's going to guide my search for possible answers. When we pick a theory, we need to justify its choice. You know, we don't say I think, but when you're talking with your chair or a research partner, you might say, I think this theory is appropriate because da 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 da. Or based on this theory, I think we should reject that variable and not even study it. I don't even think that has anything to do with what we're seeing here. So we base our research on that theory. And a theoretical framework can help us look at our research problem. It can help us build understanding of the research problem and possible solutions. So when I address that theoretical framework, when I'm writing about my research, a lot of times we just introduce it and we say, this is my theory, and we never come back to it. And that's a problem. We want to kind of design our research around that theoretical framework. I just didn't go out willy-nilly and design this research study. No, it's built upon this theory of how people learn, or it's built on this theory of customer satisfaction, or it's built on this theory of how children acquire language. So we have these theories, but we want to come back to that theory and use it to explain our findings and to interpret our findings and to explain possible solutions to the problem. So we want to revisit that theory, and also we want to look at that theory and say, well, these parts of the research problem still require more investigation because this theory was inadequate for describing what was happening in this part of the phenomenon. So we don't want to just leave our theory hanging out after we've introduced it, never circle back to it again. It's going to guide us throughout our study. We're going to use it to explain our findings, to discuss our findings. And also, we might point out how that theory proved to be, well, we don't say proved, how that theory was inadequate to address part of the problem. So theory is an idea that is been extensively tested and is generally accepted among scholars. And we want to use theory in our research to help us extend our knowledge of the problem that we're researching. So I hope this little discussion of theory has been helpful for you, and enjoy your next part of your study.